You're watching Act TV. I'm Julianna Forlano. My first guest, our regular climate contributor, Alexander Kaufman, is here to talk about the latest climate proposal unveiled by Nancy Pelosi on Tuesday. Alexander reports that the proposal has been hailed by experts as the most detailed climate plan in U.S. political history. But is it enough? Alexander Kaufman, reporter at HuffPost, writing about climate change, environmental policy, and the politics of life on a warming planet. Here to join us, Alexander, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Can you talk about this climate proposal that Pelosi unveiled? What was your reaction to it? What's in there?
So, I think this has been widely hailed by a lot of different progressive climate experts as a very progressive and exciting document. It's about a 500-page roadmap for decarbonizing the United States by 2050. And it has really generally excited a lot of the advisors that came out of Jay Inslee's climate focus campaign, that came out of groups like Data for Progress, which has done a lot of work shaping Green New Deal legislation that's been introduced so far. And it really represents a lot of kind of validation, I think, for the climate left, who had led the Green New Deal protests last year, who had asked for the House to establish a select committee on implementing the Green New Deal. They didn't. Nancy Pelosi instead implemented this select committee on the climate crisis. And ultimately, they really delivered on a plan that was in line with what I think a lot of the Green New Deal advocates hope to see. It doesn't include Medicare for all. It doesn't include a job guarantee, but it does include many of the regulatory targets and public investment type aspects. That
how do they think they're going to get people to vote for it if it doesn't have a jobs guarantee?
I don't think that they think that this is going to be voted on this session during the makeup of the Senate is what it is, and the person in the White House is who he is. But, this forms the kind of foundation of research that will be called upon for any kind of legislation that they do end up writing in the coming years. So it is very significant.
Oh, that's great. You report that 59 legislators signed on to the letter demanding more climate provisions be added to the infrastructure bill slated for a vote as early as this week. Can you explain why, what was the response to that proposal?
Yeah, so they're working right now on a $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill that's meant to be the next phase of the coronavirus stimulus. And what it's actually up to 60 different lawmakers now are calling for is for there to be a bunch of provisions in that bill around climate friendly regulations, around climate friendly infrastructure. This is what's happening in Europe right now. I mean, the European Commission and big European countries have been hugely taking this opportunity for post-COVID stimulus to decarbonize their economies. And these legislators are saying, let's do the same thing. And so doing this literally one day after this roadmap was unveiled by Nancy Pelosi and other leadership was essentially saying, but well, let's put your money where your mouth is. This was really strong in terms of a proposal, but it needs to be applied to the next big piece of legislation that we're doing, which will be this infrastructure bill. So it's an exciting way to try to push it into reality this quickly.
Why do you think they didn't add it to the first one? I was speculating before you came on that because basically people were going to see it as pork or as environmentalists trying to get something when people are dying of COVID and they're, unemployed, et cetera. Your thoughts?
There certainly was a lot of pressure on Democrats during when passing the CARES Act to just get it passed and make it happen. And there was a lot of Republican obstructionism on something like that. They pushed back and accused Pelosi and other Democrats of playing politics with necessary relief that the American people needed, in the midst of this sudden pandemic-induced depression. And so, I think they kind of shoved it off for the next couple of bills that would follow on it. And that's why you see people really pushing for it aggressively now, I think.
If we were going to get serious about getting to these zero emissions by 30 years from now, in my mind, 2050 sounds like a million years from now, but that's because I was born so long ago. 2050 is 30 years from now. What are the ways our society needs to change in order to meet those goals in a unified way?
Well, I mean, there are many things that are going to have to change during that time. I mean, the we presently get most of our electricity from burning natural gas, fracked gas. That will obviously have to change. Coal has not been fully phased out in the United States. It is rapidly going away because the economic conditions for coal are not great. But that transition isn't happening quickly enough. And in other industrialized countries, it remains a major source of electricity. Japan right now is building an additional 22 coal-fired plants. So that is an ongoing problem. Vehicles, obviously, the United States is uniquely reliant on uh, uh, on individual passenger cars, given the state of our rail compared to other industrialized countries. That'll have to change. I mean, there will have to be broad expansion of high-speed rail, of public transit, and of infrastructure for electric vehicles. And so all of these things, plus the many different types of negative emissions that you can do, either through direct air capture technology or through carbon sequestration in forests, on farmland. There are very few aspects of our lives and of the economy that won't have to change dramatically during that time if we are to meet the goals that we need to meet to avoid catastrophe. So I think it would be hard to overstate those things.
I think one big hurricane will help make this. I mean, I'm looking at the predictions here. We've already got a lot of weather disturbances, and we're not even into the like graph that goes up toward the peak of the hurricane season. So we'll see how long it takes to convince people that there's a problem. Although I was impressed with those numbers. Even 39% was it of Republicans are interested in a 100% green economy. Is that was surprising.
all of this stuff is really popular, but I think it's important to note that just because something is popular does not necessarily mean that there's the political will to do it. And there are certainly very strong industrial and big business constituencies that are not supportive of doing the kinds of things that are necessary. It's also
like
true,
having a six pack on abs is popular, but getting to them is
right?
not popular.
Right.
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
and and you have to remember that we are living through a moment where there is ramped up suppression of voters. And many of those people, if you look at polling, many of the people who care about this stuff the most are the people who live next to industrial sites and deal with the most pollution. And those are the people who are overwhelmingly poor, who are in many cases in Black or communities of color, who are being targeted by this voter suppression. So quite literally, there is an active movement to limit the power and voting influence of the people who are most likely to vote in accordance with those statistics. So there are many pressures that are on the way, certainly still, but I think it is hopeful to see that there has been such a dramatic shift in the overall opinion, and that there are so many proposals that are coming out, even within the Democratic Party, that hadn't been there previously, to really serve as a North Star as to where this can go. So
That's
there's
excellent.
ample reason for hope, but I think that there are many obstacles that remain.
What's next now that this proposal has been unveiled? What should we be watching for in Congress, and how can people help and get active around this?
Well, I think writing to and calling your legislators always and urging them to support these things is really important. But actually, I think some of the most exciting climate policy that's happening right now is happening on the municipal and local level. You're seeing some city councils banning new gas hookups in new buildings, thereby forcing the electrification of buildings. You're seeing rules around congestion pricing and other things that benefit transit and encourage people to use bicycles or other forms of low carbon transportation. And so I think fighting for those things on the local level makes what needs to happen nationally that much more likely. And so, looking beyond kind of the exciting and shining object stuff that's happening on Capitol Hill and looking at some of the things that are happening just in your community is a really, really important way for people to become active and for people to really make a big difference. And look, it really does work. I mean, we a couple of years ago we weren't even talking about gas hookup bans in any cities. Berkeley did it like 2 years ago. Brookline, Massachusetts did it soon after. And now there are several other cities around California and elsewhere that are seriously entertaining this kind of policy. And so once that just kind of proliferates from there, it's much easier to imagine a policy like that that actually has a serious impact on our dependence on fracked gas, spreading nationally.
Absolutely. Well, we're speaking with Alexander Kaufman, climate reporter from HuffPost. Alexander, thanks for being with us. I appreciate you coming on, taking
Thank
the
you
time to
so much
talk
for
with us
having
about
me.
this. All right. Have a great day.
You too.